Today we're looking at 3 science-based ways to strengthen our social fitness muscles, build more fulfilling relationships, and live a happier life. Number 1, pushing to failure. In a gym context, failure is when you literally cannot do any more reps, right? It's when your muscle starts to break down, or in other words, failure is the point where the most growth happens. And in a charisma context, it is the exact same. The most growth happens at the point of failure. Now, think of external failure like getting rejected for a conversation, getting rejected when you're asking someone out. Look at the social experiment, 100 Days of Rejection. Jia Jiang talks about this in his book, Rejection Proof, how for 100 days straight, he went out with the goal of getting rejected by strangers. Now, some of these challenges are simple, like borrowing $100 from a stranger. Some of them even funnier, like borrowing a book from Barnes & Noble. But on the more practical side, there's also more internal metrics for failure that we can all go by, right? For example, the Colin and Samir podcast talks about how for creators, failure, like a failed video, a video that does not do well, is not a roadblock. It is in fact the road. And the same mindset applies to conversations, friendships, or relationships, right? Every single failed one is not a roadblock. It's not an obstacle or a bad thing. It was a necessary step in order to understand what success even means. So how can we push our charisma muscles to either an external point of failure, like getting rejected by someone else, or an internal point of failure, like not living up to our own expectations? Well, here are a few practical examples. We don't all have to approach 100 random girls and ask for their number. Instead, we can just try to have conversations with people anytime, anywhere, right? If we're standing in line, if we're waiting for our coffee at Starbucks. But conversation is just one aspect, even deepening friendships, right? These acquaintances we meet at networking events, parties, whatever, trying to build an actual friendship with them, again, at the risk of rejection, at the risk of failing at it not working out. Because it's giving us a chance to be ourselves. Wear the clothes that we want to, say the things that we want to, believe the things that we want to, at this risk of embarrassment. And remember, the goal is not removing our nerves or removing our fear. My public speaking coach always told me that our nerves when we go on stage is the greatest acknowledgement that we care about our audience, about ourselves, about what we have to say. So the nerves are never going to go away. Instead, the goal is acting in spite of them, right? Just getting desensitized to this failure just up to a certain point where we're not paralyzed by it anymore, right? Where we're always able to act in spite of it because, again, those failures are the point of greatest muscle growth. Number 2, working different muscle groups. Side note, I promise I lift, dude. Like, this is just for the video. It's to be funny. It's the only dumbbell. In a gym context, we have compound exercises like the bench press, like the seated leg press that are working on different muscle groups at the same time. But most machines, for example, are isolation exercises. They're only working on one muscle. And if we're looking to define this in a charisma context, you can say charisma is made up of all these muscles like humor, trust, confidence, eye contact, or you can say charisma is made up of different muscle groups for different scenarios. Maybe meeting new people, or deepening our existing friendships, or being great at conflict resolution. And here's the big idea. The strength of one muscle or group does generalize a little. It does help you with other things, but at the end of the day, the muscle that grows is the muscle that you work on, which means in a charisma context, we need to individually work on each of these skills to actually develop them to their maximum potential. And we know that this is the case, right? For example, I moved 12 times in the first 17 years of my life, okay? So I'm very comfortable with meeting new people, making new friend groups, deepening those friendships, but I am extremely nervous on first dates. And I know that there's something like that for you. There's this one area that you feel comfortable, confident in, but it's just not the case with the others. So what can we do? Isolation exercises. If you want to work on your humor and being funnier, it's not going to help you to go to more parties or meet more people or hang out with your friends more. You just need to try to be funny more. And it's the same for those muscle groups, right? Those compound activities like maybe going on dates. If you want to develop that, then meeting new friends or going to networking events or hanging out with your besties more, none of that's actually going to help you. The only help comes from going on more dates. So if we want to think of charisma like a gym bro, then we have to think of each component muscle and we have to actually work on it, because at the end of the day, the muscle that grows is the muscle that we exercise. And technique number 3, rest periods. Yo, I'm terrified of dropping this. I'm just breaking everything. Ask any gym bro and you'll hear that rest periods are the most important. It's when the body actually identifies which muscles have broken down and then directs all the right nutrients to that muscle. And for charisma, it's the absolute same, except instead of the body, it's the brain, right? In these rest periods, it's when the brain can actually reflect on the experiences we've had, identify on how we felt about them, and then actually learn from what happened. And not taking proper rest can have even more consequences than we think. Number 1, obviously, we can keep doing the same thing. We can keep going to parties, keep going on dates without learning a single thing, without actually strengthening it. Or number 2, all the repeated socializing is going to start burning us out such that we stop trying to sustainably keep up a social life. We return to this exact opposite of like a hermit caveman lifestyle. Or worst of all, number 3 is that we start to take it out on other people. Or even if we're not consciously actively doing it, the people around us can feel that there's some negativity, some exhaustion emanating from us. And the only solution is recharging our social battery, but it's actually not in the way you'd think. We think of resting as time by ourselves without any social presence. That's not the case. And there's also even 2 types within that. There is passive solo time, right? Where I'm just turning my brain off. I'm just putting on a Netflix show, just sitting mindlessly watching it. But there's also active solo time, where I'm actually sitting, thinking about the experiences I've just had and reflecting on what I would like to do differently in the future. And solo time aside, there's this whole other category of rest that we don't think about. And it's being around people who require us to expend 0 energy. The simplest example is family, right? They know you in your most default state. They have seen you when you are literally not trying at all, not performing whatsoever. And so often, it's this performance, it's this act of being a person and maintaining an image that's actually draining our social battery, that's actually exhausting us so much. And it's not just family, it can be a partner, it can be friends, but it's very important to have a way to recharge our social battery while still being in a social environment, so that we don't always have to jump to being absolutely alone and being around absolutely nobody. And it's the balance of this solo active, solo passive, and communal rest time that's so critical, because without this rest, we can't push as hard when we're working out, and we won't be as motivated to keep up this workout habit in the long run. So get your rest and then go back into a social environment, like a party or something, right? A party is the gym of socializing, where you put all those muscles to test. And the psychology of joining any group conversation at a party is broken down in this video. So make sure you've got good technique, good form, so that you don't injure yourself out there. I am so funny. Okay, we'll talk soon.